Hi, my name is Daryl Thompson, and today I'm going to give you a level 1 acoustic guitar lesson on the song Heart of Worship by Matt Redman, with a special focus on the capo, the capo, the... Does anybody know how to say this word? Before we get stuck into this lesson, I think it would be a good idea to find out how to pronounce this word. And to do that, we need to go to the experts. Well, yes, what do we have here? We have the word capo, which is an abbreviated form of the word capo tasto, an Italian word made up of two words, capo, which is head, and tasto, which means fret. And so the direct translation is head fret. Yes, and so in answering your question, Daryl, the correct way to pronounce this word is capo. Well, here in the good old US of A, we're going to say this word real American-like. Capo.
Disgustoso. As Italians, we invented the word capo tasto, which means we get to tell you how to say it. Mato. Oh, solo pisa.
So however you choose to say this word, I think the most important thing about a capo is to know what it's for. So what is a capo for? Well, considering the Italian word capo tasto, which is head fret, think about it. Where on your guitar is the head fret along this fretboard? It has to be this, the nuts, this ivory or this creamish looking part of the guitar. And in essence, what this is it's where it cuts off the strings. The strings will, it's like a bridge, the strings will go over towards the tuning pegs. And that means that this string is as long as the nut to the saddle or the bridge. And so we have a specific length of the string, which helps us with tuning that string. Now, the tuning rules are that if a string is long, it is low. The longer the string, the lower the pitch. But the shorter the string, the higher the pitch. So if I had to take my capo, which is a head fret, but it's also a movable nut, and I had to move it up the guitar neck, think about this, taking this principle keeping it in mind. If a long string is a low pitch and a short string is a high pitch, what will happen if I move the capo up the fretboard? It will make the strings shorter, which makes them higher. So what can happen is I can have a guitar that sounds a little bit like a mandolin, which is pretty interesting. It's a nice option to have when you would like to have a different sound. Now, speaking of sounds, we have capos. This one, in this case, is actually covering all 6 strings, but you also get capos that only will cover some of the strings, which gives you some interesting tuning. Speaking of tuning, as a rule of thumb, it would be a good idea every time you put a capo on your guitar to check the tuning again. Why do I say that? Well, look, some guitars are really good when it comes to the intonation and that kind of thing, but in general, depending on your intonation, depending on the type of guitar, guitars respond differently to different types of capos, and you might find that as you move your capo around on the guitar neck, the tuning of the guitar could go out, plus the capo tends to change the way the strings, being shorter or longer, how their tuning works. So I'm going to give you an example of how this works. Let's say I put my capo on like this. The bottom E string is a lot longer than the high E string. So this is what happens. Which, I'm exaggerating this point, but I want you to see that just the slightest, I mean, let me try and put the capo parallel to the frets, which is the idea. Even if I'm out by like a fraction of a millimeter, there's still going to be a variance, a difference between one string and the string next to it. So what should we do? Just tune your strings, stay safe. All right, why do we use a capo in a worship set specifically? So, hey, I might have seen Matt Redman playing with the capo on the 2nd fret, and he looked pretty cool doing it. So maybe if I want to look cool, I need to have a capo as well. Now, as much as that might be true, I want to give you 4 reasons why you would want to use a capo. One of them is so you can look cool, but the other 4 are also really good reasons. So, for example, if I took this capo off, this song is in the key of E major. Now, I was playing with a capo and I had a D shape, but in essence, I was playing E major. So if I had to play without the capo, here I go. having to use some bar chords here. Now when I say bar chord, I'm talking about my first finger going across a few of the strings, if not all 6. And that takes quite a bit of work for your left hand to do. So if I had to do that in an entire worship set, man, my left hand would be pretty tired. And so what I do is I get my capo tasto, or my movable nut, and I put it in a certain place where I know I would be normally barring a lot of the chords. And so the capo becomes my first finger, which means I can now work with other shapes of chords and not work so hard. Which brings me on to my second reason why a capo is a good idea in a worship set. If I've got a capo on, I can play what we call open chords. I talked about bar chords, but now I'm talking about open chords. An open chord is a chord where you fret some of the strings, but some of the strings in your chord are open. So for example with this D shape, your D string, let me get to D string. This D string is open, which means it's being fretted by the capo, or if you were playing without a capo, it would be fretted by the nut. And that means a couple of things. An open string will ring for longer, there's much more sustain, and an open string also sounds fuller. So if you're playing a bunch of open chords in your chord progression, like this one, D, A sus4, E minor 7, we've got a few open strings in there, which means that our chord progression sounds fuller, bigger, it sustains longer. And with an acoustic guitar, you like that sustained sound. You like the sound of the sound waves moving through the air, and that means that your capo makes you sound better. So the third reason why a capo is a good idea in a worship set is when you're having to change keys. Now it's a good idea to understand your circle of fifths, to understand your scales and your keys, so that you can do this anyway, but the capo makes it a lot easier. So for example, let's say you were playing in the key of E major and your worship leader was struggling with that key and wanted to take it higher to, let's say, F sharp. All you do is you take your capo and you put it 2 frets higher and you play the same chord shapes as you were before, without having to change the kind of chord shapes you're playing or the kind of chords that you're playing with. Now, doesn't that make some of our piano players envious? And the fourth reason why a capo is a really good idea is when you have 2 guitars on stage. There could be 2 electric guitars, 2 acoustic guitars, an electric and an acoustic combination. And what you'll find is that, as a general rule, you want to have one guitar playing lower on the neck, so the lower strings, the lower pitches, the lower notes, while the other guitar accompanies that guitar on the higher part of the fretboard. And so they play higher up here. And so what you could do with a capo, instead of having to work out all these strange and wonderful chords, which is also great, you can just use a capo, put the capo up here, and here you are playing open chords, which we said again makes you sound fuller and makes the sustain of your strings work better. And you sound great next to a guitar who's playing down here. What I'll do now is I'll play the song through, and then afterwards I'll show you the chords that I used, as well as some of the things that I incorporated to make the song easy to play. So here we go. So now that I've played the song, let's firstly look at your left hand. We're going to be looking at how to change the chords and some nice little tricks. So as I was changing between D major, A sus4, E minor 7, G, and and then back to A sus4, you'll notice that one of my fingers was stuck in its place. It didn't move. And that was my third finger, which I had here on the 5th fret on the 2nd string. And this is a pretty helpful thing because it creates like an anchor. Your hand stays in the same place, so you know where you are. If you have to maybe sing in a microphone or you have to be looking elsewhere, you don't have to look at your fretboard all the time to tell where you are. Your finger is letting you know you're in the right place. So you keep your third finger there, you change from D to A sus4. Now notice I'm only moving my 1st and 2nd finger when I go from D to A sus4. Then to go from A sus4 to E minor 7, again, I just move my 1st and 2nd finger. If I want to add my pinky to the high E string, I can just simply add it there. And then move to the G string. Again, just my 1st and 2nd finger are moving, which creates economy, which puts less strain on your fingers. But now, just to be careful, we don't want to be pushing with our 3rd finger so hard that by the time we finish playing the song, there's this huge dent in the middle of our 3rd finger, and our hand is so tired. That's obviously defeating the purpose. So what you want to do is, as you fret a string, find that place where it's just like it's a buzz, but then it rings true. Just there you go. Find that place. Find that place. So you're just pressing hard enough to make it ring true, and not light enough for it to start buzzing. That way you're using the least amount of effort in your left hand possible, which means you can play for a long period of time. And when you get older, you'll also be able to still use your hand because you won't have tired it out by playing guitar and abusing your hands when you're young. So let's look now at your right hand. Now the same principles that we applied to the left hand of being loose, being gentle, not applying too much pressure, apply to the right hand as well. So what you've got is this up and down movement on your guitar. And so what you want to do is you want to not use your muscles, not push down. You want to let gravity do the work for you. So you're letting your hand fall. Let your hand fall against the strings. And this means that when you get to the bottom and you have to pick your hand back up again, you're engaging your muscles to fight gravity to pick your hand up again, but your muscles aren't fighting themselves because you've done a downstroke that included your muscles, and there's this tension in your arm as your muscles fight against each other, switching from a downward motion to an upward motion, if you understand what I mean. So practice doing this. You've got a downward, up, in a small area of the guitar, covering a few strings at the speed that you can, but making sure that your downstroke is letting gravity do the work. And then what we have is our strumming pattern. And before I can help you with the strumming pattern, I need to explain to you what 16th notes are. So in every bar of music, if we're talking about 16th notes, every bar of music means that we have 16 notes or 16 beats in that bar. And so we would count those 16th notes like this: 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. If I did that quicker, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. So that's how that would go, like this: 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. Now the thing is, I didn't play the song like that. I played it in a specific pattern, which means I used those 16th notes and the way I'm counting those 16th notes to remind myself of the pattern, but I only land on certain parts of that formula, if you will. So this is how I played it: 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1. Now I sped up because I did actually play it a bit faster than just the way I started out. But what you could do is, at your own pace, count it and then get good at not just counting it, but hearing what you're playing. So eventually you don't have to count. You know what it sounds like, which is what you need with your right hand before you can go to your left hand and combine the two to make the song. So notice how I'm changing between each chord as I do the strumming pattern. It's a lot to keep in mind, but as you practice this, your brain gets better and better at using these two coordinated movements and making them work together in a fluid way. So I'm going 1 and Okay, so notice as I change from D to A sus4, 1 E and I just hit on an upstroke the high E and the high B string together, and I'm moving my first and second finger towards the place where they will land so I can get an A sus4 chord. So I've used one of the strokes in that pattern that I've created to give me room, give me time to change chords. So here we go again, listen. And I'll do the same as I go from A sus4 to E minor. I'll keep going. So you would just slow it down to a pace that you can do it at, but keep in mind that you can actually use that space where you're moving your fingers to add another strum. Now, something that I would just warn you about is don't go too far with this. You don't want to be playing one chord and then just play all 6 strings like I've heard some guitarists do, and what you get is this really dissonant grouping of notes that don't work with the chords that you're playing, don't work in the key that you've got. It can sound kind of, yeah, amateur. And a lot of people do this most likely because they've just gotten used to it. Their ear has gotten dull to this mistake that they're making. So as you give yourself room by strumming up to change to the next chord, make sure that you're hitting the strings that will give you a nice sound. Here we go. So there's no sense of in between chords. It still sounds nice, it still sounds good, and that's what's awesome about playing an instrument, especially the guitar. Well, that is the end of this lesson 1 video. Hey, be on the lookout for my lesson 2 video, which will help you to grow to your next level of awesome.